So I'm a big fan of the first game, and I have one question. What's wrong with the makeup?
Physics. Physics.
Make our own physics.
That's something we actually discussed for Mass Effect 3 as well, is putting the Mako back in, but physics would not cooperate with us. And there's a phenomenal amount of content in Mass Effect 3. I know you're speaking about one, but in Mass 3 there's a ton of content, and we just could not get it to work soon enough. So it's kind of something that fell by the wayside a little bit.
Sorry, dude, making it run.
You guys are like heroes around Edmonton, but what has given you the inspiration to aspire to the great places where you guys are today? You guys make amazing games and you make people like me tear up.
Ever since I was a child. But yeah, no, seriously, ever since I was a kid, all I wanted to do was write. I'm not a writer right now, I'm a cinematic designer, but I went from writing to making little, simple, like 3D animations, and then I was like, I think I might want to do this for a living, so I just kept doing it more, and my grades were going down, and stay in school. And yeah, no, eventually I ended up pushing away biology, chemistry, maths, and just did as much of this as I could. Started working for myself, and then I ended up here. So most of us just tried, I think, to work in a job where we wouldn't be working, because it's what we wanted to do in the first place.
As cliche as it might sound, I mean, most of us didn't grow up playing games. I mean, we do have that background, and once again, as cliche as it is, it's just follow your passion, put priority on what's really truly important to you, and then the other things that normally people consider get in the way, it's just a hurdle to get where you want to go.
The person doing the finger jazz hands. Yeah, choice.
Actually, I'm Pop.
Are you? Sorry. I couldn't see.
First of all, I don't know if Patrick remembers, but a couple years ago he came out to Stony Point Public Library, and the kids in Stony Point still talk about that, so I just wanted to let you know you are kind of a hero in Stony Point as well. And because I am from a library, and I'm more of a book geek than a gamer geek, please don't lynch me, I am curious, how much effect does Bioware, or how much control rather, does Bioware have on the books and the graphic novels that come out? And because you put so much cinematic detail into the game itself, is there not a possibility there while you're developing the game to be developing a movie at the same time? Like, it's almost a movie script already. Like, I've seen when Bioware came out, they showed us the lines of script, and it would make a 600-page book, I believe, is what it worked out to. So, and that's just from the game, that's not an actual book. So would it not be easy to do all that cross-platforming at the same time, or is that just too much all at once?
For your second question, I think we're just so concentrated as we're making the game on making the game that we really don't focus on any other forms of medium in-house. I understand like where you're coming from in terms of we are actually creating the certain assets and cinematics and stuff like that as we go. However, they all have to lend to the core focus and raising up the game. And if we were doing a movie or something else, like they would have a different kind of narrative direction, and then everything would have to be architected around that. In terms of doing all the other stuff that we do, it depends really on what we're doing. But for the most part, we'll work with people, our artists, writers, whoever, and we'll kind of define very loosely or very broadly the direction that the sandbox in which they can play with it, and the stories that they can tell. And then it is really just an iterative process back and forth. So for example, we did an iPad game at the same time as we were developing Mass 3, and it was called Infiltrator. And one of the studios in Australia did that game for us. And so, we kind of just gave them the loose, like, okay, you know what, it'd be really cool if you're like a Cerberus escapee And that was kind of what the game was about. And then they basically live within that boundary, and then they send us builds, we give them feedback, they go back, they change it, they send it back. So it's that constant iterative process. And it works really well. Now, sometimes basically we won't hear from a studio or from an artist for a while, and they'll come back and they'll give us this huge plethora of awesome stuff that we can say, like, no, that's awesome, keep that, that's awesome, keep that. And it also works the same way with like the merchandise and the shirts and stuff like that. So it's really just the wider our brand, the more of those we just kind of have to manage.
I will say though, actually getting the chance to work on, I got to work on one of the Dark Horse comics, the Homeworlds one with Tally. And that was a really interesting process for me because I'd never really worked on comics before. I read them, I liked them, but I hadn't worked on them. So that was a chance that I wouldn't have gotten any other way. Just to kind of like dive in and learn about how to write for a new form of media, with its own constraints and its own strengths and limitations. And that was a lot of fun. So, Mac has put out a lot of comics. So have John Dombrow and Sylvia, and then Drew wrote several of the Mass Effect novels. So it's actually been a chance for us to branch out as well.
Thanks. Just before I ask my question, I just want to say that I really appreciate all the little references about Edmonton and Calgary in the games, especially the Edmonton ones, of course, but also for the local talent, like the music that's in the games. That I was always a little bit disappointed that there wasn't as much in 2, but you definitely made up in 3, so that was great. My question has more to do with the. I really like the special editions that you guys came out for the documentaries on bonus discs. And on the first one in particular, I forget the name of the developer, but he went into great length talking about how to develop the Geth and how it looks. I think that came really strongly as the Geth Sapper in the first game. And so what I was wondering is, what happened to the Sapper in 2 and 3? And why was it cut?
I personally can't speak to it.
Yeah, it turned out, so what you may have noticed in Mass 2 was they were really trying to get a coherent enemy set. So you had Blue Suns, Eclipse, and Blood Pack. They really wanted the 3 different groups to feel differently. The Blue Suns were more heavy weapons and more of a focus on lots of big guns. Eclipse was more powers focused. And both Blue Suns and Eclipse would have mechs as well. And then the Blood Pack would use, like the Krogan is the heavies, the Vorcha with, special weapons and stuff, and then kind of the Baron to flush you out of cover. What ended up, coming up with something that was that big a change for the combat, actually ended up requiring significant changes to the geometry, the level layout, and everything. And one of the things we lost was, unfortunately, the ability to have enemies cling to walls, and it was a kind of a narrow thing. We definitely didn't cut them casually. There were a lot of points where we're pushing to get these creatures back in. Could there be other creatures that are like the Geth Sapper that do the same kind of thing? And it ended up, it just, with all the changes we made to combat, we really loved the changes, and we thought they were good, solid changes that definitely made the gameplay better. And the cost of that was losing guys who could cling the walls.
About the red jacket. Yeah.
Is there competition between teams, to outdo each other?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say outdo each other, it just means essentially push things further and further. I know that, even Leo kind of alluded to it there. You guys will ask for things that are next to impossible sometimes. That puts great stress on the other teams, those kind of things.
So yeah, Patrick outdoes cinematic design all the time by asking for things that we really don't want to put in. Scott overperforms, and we ask for a point, and then mocap actors don't just stand there and point. They'll really throw their whole bodies into it and put it back and go, Like, Pikachu, I choose you! There's a small amount of, I don't know, I think it's just everyone wants to excel. It's difficult to say my cinematic design was better than your level design, so, yeah.
I think it's more almost between each other. We want to fit in as much as possible, and I know the cinematic design was, everyone had such great work that every time you saw that you almost thought, well, I can make mine even better. It's like we almost kind of spar each other along, and if it wasn't for time or technical limitations, it was just we put in as much as we possibly can, and yeah, we just egg each other on to put in the best stuff that we can.
There's a lot of questions. The guy in the striped sweater, like right there with glasses.
Hello. First of all, big fan. But my question is, with Mass Effect 1, when it came out, there was a little bit of a controversy over some of the content. I think like some of the codes were like, oh, you're gonna have sex with an alien. With 2 and with 3, I didn't really think that that kind of happened. Do you think that was a change in the audience, the industry, or how you guys kind of addressed some of those issues in the universe? Because a lot of the things were some of my favorite in the game.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of controversy still. Like we seem to be magnets for controversy sometimes. That said, I personally think that the industry has changed a little bit. You've seen a lot. I mean, it's kind of like anything. You see a lot more studios and people kind of adopting certain things in recent years. That kind of makes it easier for everyone else to put out certain pieces of content. When Mass 1 came out, obviously, I don't think many people had seen the kind of things that we were trying to do. And that's not to say that everyone else since has tried to replicate that. It's just more that there's more people doing more things, and it becomes less of a hot issue. I mean, a lot of times, all people are looking for is that one headline that can, like explode into something that's controversial. And even in Mass 1, it wasn't really that controversial. So, I think it's just a kind of a movement of the industry. What do you guys think?
Well, I guess just to add to that, I didn't work on any of the romances in Mass 1, but it did sting all of us a little to have that come out and have people say, yeah, you have sex with anything, this is a crazy porn game. And you're like, really? Like the crazy porn game in which we've let you live your fantasy of talking to someone for like 25 to 30 hours and learning about their family history and their personal problems and forming a deep connection, and eventually, after 25 to 30 hours of gameplay, you get, a nice, fairly tasteful, understated romance scene. Like, that's the crazy porn. And so, one of the things that we did, we never flinched from showing mature content. But what I think we did was we wanted to make moments that would really feel like a payoff of the relationship you had had with that person. That's one of the reasons why in Mass Effect 1, you really had one love scene with slightly different cuts, but they're very close to the same animations. In Mass Effect 2, 6 full romances. And each of those romances got a different scene. You cannot just take out Miranda and put in Garrus and have the same scene. But if you could. And I think we tried to carry that through to Mass Effect 3 to get to a point where, maybe the cutscene isn't as titillating, but it's more of a payoff of the character and the character relationship, what you have formed with that person over the playthrough.